What's up everybody, this is Zoya, the Russian Korean, and right now we are approaching the end of Worlds 2021. As some of you may know from my Discord or various posts on Instagram and here on YouTube, as well as some of the videos which I've made before, which by the way, if you haven't seen, feel free to check out. I like to talk about League Esports. I watch the LCK pretty closely. Even though I'm fairly new to League, I got into the esports part of it, the esports side of it, pretty quickly. Learned about the current teams, what's happening, and I guess just in general became interested in, what region is the best, what region is doing well. And I'm sure we will all agree that China, the LPL, throughout the years has been performing very well. One, if not the most dominant region in the world. People may disagree here. I personally disagree. I think Korea is the best region. Of course, there's a little bit of a personal bias, but also we can't disregard the fact that pretty much every dominant Chinese team currently, not every team, but almost every team has Korean imports. Whereas Korean teams right now that are dominant, that are performing well at Worlds, they don't have any Chinese imports. So I think that tells us something, about which region actually produces the most talent in League. And this is something that actually I wanted to talk about today because I'm watching Worlds and also, the global news, what's happening in China. And it makes me wonder about a few things. Of course, I have to preface this by saying that these are just my personal speculations, so it may never come true or it may not be the case at all. I don't know the inner workings of, what's happening in mainland China when it comes to esports. But from the looks of it, from what we're hearing and from what is available to us in terms of information, I guess I'm gonna try to kind of talk about this topic that I personally think is pretty interesting and also will impact, in my opinion, the fate of LPL in the near future. So right now we are moving close to the conclusion of Worlds 2021, and out of all the semifinalists, only one team is from the LPL, and that is Edward Gaming. The rest of the teams are all Korean. Going into this, I personally expected China to be the most dominant region. And here's my reasoning. It's because during the summer split in the LCK, which is what I regularly watch, the casters and the analysts and just regular people in the comment section, everybody was talking about how the LCK is looking kind of shaky. Everyone was talking about the change of rosters, the change of coaches in multiple different teams. And so most people were kind of predicting that, at this Worlds, probably the only Korean team that's going to be like a major contender for a finalist will be Damwon Kia. Everyone else will be kind of like maybe there, play their part, but in the end, it's really only Damwon Kia that we need to worry about, and Damwon Kia is having its own problems, blah, 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 blah. On the contrary, those same people were putting tons of faith in China because they were saying that, that region doesn't have the same kind of instability or the same kind of massive changes that we're seeing in the LCK. It's a lot more predictable, should I say? And I mean, I get it because in the LCK, in the summer split, it was a complete bonanza. Actually, it was really fun to watch because you never knew who was gonna win. For example, DRX, who made it into Worlds last year, just completely got stomped out of the competition. Nongshim were doing really well in the beginning to the point where people were like, wow, Nongshim is like an actually really good team. And then something happened and then everything just went downhill for them. And Hanwha Life made it instead of them. And then T1 with their new coach and swapping out Teddy and Gumayushi, top lane and jungle and like pretty much everyone except Faker. It was MS. So yeah, I agree. Even to me personally, it looked like the LPL was at that time a lot more stable, and I was a little bit concerned about the LCK going into Worlds, thinking, well, maybe this time, the region that I'm rooting for, LCK, will not be as dominant, and I was actually looking forward to seeing what's gonna happen. But as I said already, things turned out to be quite different. Korea is definitely showing to be quite the beast. And the only other contenders were, China, Europe, and NA. And unfortunately, Europe and NA got eliminated in the quarterfinals. So now it's down to China and Korea. And there is big debate with people saying, China is more dominant or Korea is more dominant. And they keep going back and forth. And I'm not here to talk about that. What I am here to talk about is this question that that has been on my mind recently, especially because of the recent news that have come out about gaming restriction in China. So the question is, how is the LPL going to be looking from now on? Are we witnessing the downfall of Chinese dominance in esports in general? It's hard to make big conclusions, but we can certainly look at some factors and nuances here that may help us to kind of discuss this. So first of all, like I already said, we are already seeing some shakiness of the LPL on the international stage. First off, only one team from China made it to the semifinals. The two teams that many people had their sights on, FPX and RNG, are already out. Only Edward Gaming made it into the semis, but EDG lost. It was only one game, but they still lost that game to 100 Thieves at the group stage, which meant they lost the tiebreaker to T1, so they couldn't be, first place in their group. Whether that was strategic or not, I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to do like the additional however many games to break the tie with T1. I don't know if that was intentional. But I do think that 100 Thieves really put up a good fight, and I liked all the interviews afterward where they were saying how even though we've gotten eliminated already, we still wanted to play our hardest so that we could secure first spot for T1. I thought it was very nice of them. So at that point, everybody from Korea became a fan of 100 Thieves. And so yeah, with all that in the background, we're kind of seeing that something is apparently happening that we are maybe not witnessing, like front stage. And perhaps, that's just the luck of the draw and maybe it's just the Worlds this year. But there is something else that kind of concerns me in terms of the future of the LPL, and that is the new gaming ban or restriction for minors in mainland China. So the news rolled out in like late August, early September, and as we can see right here, even in this video, like somebody's playing League. Like it's obvious that League is actually a big part of just the esports culture in China, and I personally think this is going to affect the LPL in the very near future, especially because let's take a look at actually what happened. China has barred online gamers under the age of 18 from playing on weekdays and limited their play to just 3 hours most weekends, marking a significant escalation of restrictions on the country's massive gaming industry. Starting this week, minors will be allowed only in 1 hour of play between 8 to 9 p.m. on Friday, weekends, and public holidays, according to a statement from Chinese media watchdog, the National Press and Publication Administration, that was posted by state news agency Xinhua on Monday. The move represents a huge tightening of earlier limits set by the agency in 2019, which had restricted play to 90 minutes on weekdays and 3 hours on weekends for children. Authorities said that the restrictions were put in place to help prevent young people becoming addicted to video games, So, like, they have their reasons for restricting things, whether you agree with it or not. That's not what I want to talk about. I personally believe that people should decide things for themselves, and when it comes to children, their parents should be in charge of what they are doing and not the government. But I digress. The point of this is 1 hour a day. Guys, how many matches can you play in an hour, realistically? In my case, just one, because I'm not even high elo, right? And my queue times are pretty fast, but even with that, the game can be, probably the shortest that it can be is if the enemy surrenders at 15 minutes, which doesn't happen very often. And so it's at least 20 something minutes, but mostly it's around half an hour. And then you have to queue up, you have to get into champ select, and then probably someone will dodge, and then you do it again. And imagine in high elo, it's even more of an issue with dodging and everything. So you're spending at least 20 minutes just getting into a game. And then you're playing 30 minutes of it, and then you're done, right? That's the end. I know that some of you might say, well, the CCP had been placing bans like this left and right before, and somehow people found their way around it. And while that may be true, I think now the current situation is a little bit different. It's getting more and more difficult to break these rules. The reason being is because, technology, the AI facial recognition is actually pretty sophisticated in China. And so let's say you want to use your older brother's account or use your dad's ID, it ain't gonna work. It's gonna recognize the fact that this is not your dad playing, okay? In addition, in certain areas in China, not across the whole country, but in certain areas, they are already implementing and trying out the new social credit score system, which basically rates you on how well you obey the government and line up with the CCP. I'm not exactly sure how breaking gaming rules will affect your social credit score, but I'm pretty sure if you're breaking any rules, it's not very good for you. So whereas before, there were rules, but there were ways around it, people had had some sort of freedom in terms of like choosing to break the rule or not, and some ways to go around it being undetected, now there are a lot more kind of sinister consequences when it comes to actually breaking the law. So I don't know how willing people will be to go out of their way to risk their standing, I guess, in the eyes of the CCP, just because they want to play a few more matches in League. And these are all pretty serious issues. And so with these new restrictions and tighter control on what people are doing, it's quite difficult for new talent to develop. Because if you think about it, like a lot of the pros, right, in League, they often make their first appearance before they're even adults. They are 16 or 17 years old, a lot of them. In academy, they're even younger sometimes. But those are the people that are going to be affected the most by this law. On the other hand, perhaps, and I don't know if that will be the case, but they could make exceptions for, you know, current pros. The people who are not yet 18 but are already pros. Perhaps for those people they could make some sort of exceptions. But what about potential talent? And this is what I want to emphasize. With esports, it's constantly about the flow of new talent. Yes, there are people who have been in the league for a while, but for the majority of people, they are there for maybe 2 or 3 years and then they retire. And then new talent comes out that's younger, fresher, better. And so that's just how it is. But if those who are 13, 14, 15 years old right now getting restricted, then your chances of finding, you know, better, stronger, new potential talent is shrinking by a lot. So that to me is the biggest problem, is that this kind of law and these kinds of restrictions, they actually stifle new talent in mainland China. Now I've seen some comments on different articles and posts on videos on YouTube where people would say, well, China, like the gaming industry in China is so big, for sure they wouldn't be shooting themselves in the foot by restricting gaming and thereby weakening their presence in esports. I think people who make comments like this, they don't realize that the CCP's priority is not like performance in esports. I mean, I'm smiling here, but in reality, it's actually not very funny, because what they're trying to do, and what even the article, you know, even just briefly mentioned, but that is very apparent here, is that there is tighter control on the population, on what people are doing, on how people are raising their children, and just like micromanaging them, basically. It's not like they gathered to make that law and were like, but it's going to make it difficult for us in esports. Like maybe somebody said that, but ultimately that's not really a big concern. So while the government is giving out these kind of mandates, everyone else just kind of has to line up. And I'm sure that many gaming organizations in China are going to be feeling the heat of it very soon, perhaps even right now. So yeah, when it comes to esports domination, I think they totally are shooting themselves in the foot. They know it, but it doesn't matter. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, if you look at the LPL as it stands currently, they already have a lot of imports, especially from Korea, and it's been like that for a while. But there has always been tons and tons of Chinese talent. But if a lot of this Chinese talent gets restricted from even playing at all, then it will be quite difficult to find new talent in China. So this may result actually in what some of the NA LCS owners and coaches kind of talked about for some time. It was the lifting of the import rule or restriction, which is instead of limiting imports to only 2 spots on the team, just completely lift the limitations so that you can basically have an entire team of imports. For example, let's say you have this NA team, any team, and then they have currently, as it is, like 3 people who are American, because that's the rule currently, and then 2 other people, maybe one import from like Korea and another import from Europe or something like that. But if they lift the import rule, then you can have the whole group, like the 5 people, 1 from China, 1 from Korea, theoretically, 1 from Europe, maybe like 1 from NA, and then another person from like somewhere else. And there, I think, are multiple issues with that. But this is quite likely now, in my personal opinion, and we'll see if it happens or not. Maybe I'm way off the mark on this one, but it's quite possible that Riot, especially being based in China, is going to seriously consider the lifting of the import rule so that China can import as many people as they can. They have tons of money to do that. They're already importing tons of people. And if it becomes a lot more difficult to find domestic talent, then what's the solution? Lift the import rule. So with all that in mind, I think we are going to be seeing a lot of changes in the LPL. I'm not saying that all of a sudden they're going to be like terrible. I think they're still going to be really good. They're probably going to be still one of the best regions in League of Legends esports, but perhaps not as dominant or stompy as they have been up till now. That's it for my rant today. How did you guys like today's topic, this discussion? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think these gaming restrictions will really affect esports or not really? What do you think about the import rule? Let me know in the comment section below. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. This was Zoya, the Russian Korean. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.